What is up, guys? Welcome to the All In Podcast with Bad Beat Bryce and Ryan the Rock. How are you doing today, Ryan?
Oh my God. In the excitement of the moment, Bryce, you forgot the name of our podcast. Unfortunately, there are a lot of other podcasts that are very similarly named to ours, Bryce, but ours is the All In Poker Podcast.
What did I say?
I said the All In Podcast.
Oh, close enough.
I mean, yeah, but that one is run by, I can't remember his name. But if
Evan
you search that on
Jarvis?
YouTube, we won't come up. All
I
In
think it's
Poker
Evan
Podcast,
Jarvis.
Bryce. Unbelievable.
There we go. Well, good things no one's watching us live and we got the edited version.
There's something about like, I don't know if this is for you, but maybe this is the little bit degenerate gambler that's in me. I like the good snap of nice cards. You know, when you peel your cards, got a nice snap back to the table.
No, card quality is definitely important. I don't think that's degenerate at all.
And one of the casinos in our state, Foxwoods, I went there and literally comical the quality of the cards. I mean,
Really?
I've gotten better quality of cards in like a freaking Happy Meal. I mean, they were like plastic and
in the Skulls
and, like,
home games, we had better cards.
I was like, how? Like, how is a casino with like the biggest room in the state running with these absolutely atrocious? I mean, really, like I left because the quality of the cards was so bad.
You nerd.
Yeah, and because I sat there for an hour at the top of the list for 2-5, and then I didn't get called for a 2-5 game, and there was no list of Mohegans. So I was like, yay, I'm out of here. This week on the All In Poker Podcast, we are proud to present our 8th female guest, June Cuervo. After graduating from St. John's College in 2015 with a degree in liberal arts, June worked for several different video game studios as a lead game designer before COVID hit. As of 2021, June has moved to Las Vegas with her wife and fellow poker professional, Melissa, to chase every recreational player's dream of making a living at the tables in Vegas. We can't wait to ask her about becoming a professional poker player, the impact of being a trans member of the poker community, and much, much more. Without further ado, let's welcome June to the podcast.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome.
Yeah, that was a really great info. Well done. Intro.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ryan works hard on those.
I sound so awesome. Wow.
You're doing some cool things. I think that's always the fun part is like, you know, you start in this process of looking for stuff about people and you're like, oh, like, you know, I know you play poker. Then you find out, oh, goodness, like you have 8 years of experience as a lead designer in video games that you've been helping design some AAA titles. Like that is so cool. I think that's freaking fascinating. But this is a great way to start. The most generic first question that someone can ask in a poker interview is, how did you get into poker? But your story is quite interesting. Like the amazing professional poker players Ike Haxton, David Williams, Justin Bonomo, and previous podcast guest Jeff Boski, your first competitive card game was Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's so common that professional poker players come from a background in playing card games like that?
I get just like the thing about Magic is it gets you sort of hooked on the kind of gameplay, like that sort of like card-based high variance gameplay. It's like a childhood acceptable poker in like a lot of ways, right? Like I played Magic when I was 11. You know, I didn't play poker when I was 11. It'd be ridiculous. I didn't go to poker tournaments when I was 11. That's illegal.
Right.
I played Magic cards with my friends in the schoolyard, right? So it's like, it's one of those things where I think it's just accessible to children. And it is like, it has a lot of the same gameplay elements as poker. I actually think poker, the similarities between Magic and poker are probably a little overstated overall. They're very, very different games.
Yeah.
The main ways in which they're similar is they're very high variance. You very often make the best play and still lose. And like really that's it. They're just both super high variance games where like you make EV based decisions in both games.
Yeah. I guess I've never really thought of Magic the Gathering in that way, but in like the cards that you draw and the specific things that you get. And yeah, that is interesting that you can make all the correct moves and get rolled.
Yeah. So there's like just a lot of like, I think in poker you always say like you do the best with the hand you're dealt, right? It's like Magic's very similar. You just get some cards, your opponent gets some cards, and then you play some of your cards, and then that combination of your cards and your opponent's cards creates sort of the landscape of that game you're playing, and you're just trying to make the best decision in that highly variant space.
Right. And there's so many infinite combos of the way that those cards can come out that's what makes it interesting. Yeah, but I think that's at the end of the day is like what makes poker interesting is that like No Limit Hold'em is a very hard thing to solve. Like we're using computer generated programs to figure out this game. Like it's made it really hard for me to sit down and play like normal card games like Phase 10 or something where it's like because of poker and being forced to think about game theory. Now I'm sitting there, I'm like, this is literally just variance. Like that is all this is. There is no skill at all. I am drawing a card, I am discarding a card, and that is all that I do. So it's like I really struggle now. Like I have to force my family to play strategy-based card games if they're gonna play because I can't do those anymore. It's so hard. It's hard.
There's like a 3% skill edge in Phase 10. Some people discard their own cards. But
my mom destroys us in Phase 10.
Do you still actively play Magic the Gathering?
I do, yeah. I mean, It's sort of like, I really think of myself as like a purely recreational Magic player, like the go to the casino once a week type, if you will, of Magic players. There's like a local card store that has like what's called F&M or Friday Night Magic that has the format of Magic that I play. So I'll play for a few hours on Friday night here and there.
Oh, that's cool.
That's awesome.
And it's, it's fun. It's like, I don't go to big tournaments. I don't like go to all the Grand Prix. Like there's like the equivalent of like the WPTs, right? Or whatever in Magic where there's these like
it's
series that people play in. I don't do any of that. I don't care at all. I just think that the game is pretty fun and it's a good refresh from poker, which is like, I think oftentimes kind of anxiety inducing. If you're super in it all the time, it's good to just take a step back and do something different that you enjoy. So that's kind of the role Magic serves in my life.
You talked about that yourself on your Twitter. You put up a poll that was about like, have you guys ever gotten to a point with poker that it's anxiety inducing to think about playing a session? And I don't know, like Bryce, I totally agreed with that. I was like 100% I've gotten to that point with the game where like, you put 2 or 3 frustrating sessions in a row. And like, when you go in for the 4th one, you just like see these monsters under the bed, like they're going to happen. And even if you're going to have a good session and you don't know it, like you still feel like it's not going to go well.
100%.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it's just like anything else. It's like, you're only human. There's often the poker advice that gets sort of passed around. That's like, you should be stoic. Like you shouldn't care about the wins and losses or whatever. I think that's actual total horseshit. It's like really bad advice. The truth is that you're a human being. You have emotions. You're going to be happy when you win and sad when you lose. What matters is that you're able to sort of like recognize you're having those emotions and like process them internally from like session to session. So you feel good every time you play. But like I've had like the worst month of poker and I'm not even really down. I think I'm up like $400, but I've played like 180 hours. And it's one of those things where it's like, that just happens sometimes. Like I've been card dead for like 140 of the 180 hours or something or more. Like I've just been like card dead like the whole time.
How do you stay focused? So if you're on like a live grind and you're struggling with being card dead, did you have any like tips or tricks that you do to stay focused? Like I always find myself like, as soon as I start looking at the football game or something, like after I've folded like 4 or 5 hands in a row, like I'll just lock in on the football game and I'll not be paying attention to what's going on at the table.
I don't really think like I have a pretty like probably hot take for live poker players, which is I don't really think you have to pay attention to what other people are doing. I don't really think that they pay attention to what you're doing. I don't think they're folding or calling or doing anything based on anything you're doing. I think they're just going to 3-bet the hands they 3-bet and fold to a 3-bet the times they fold. And for the most part, people don't really like, we all like to think that we have a table image or like I don't know, like we all like to think these things, but the reality is like, I've been card dead for 4 hours, gotten aces, 3-bet, got 4-bet, got it in. And I'm like, what'd you have? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, all right, whatever, cool, I win. Like, it's like, that happens. Like, that's just like I think we all really like, we're all human. Like we like creating these narratives in our heads of like, how people are perceiving us and how we're perceiving other people. But I think the truth is that once the cards are dealt, people have like a default strategy and they stay pretty close to that strategy. They're not deviating too wildly from it regardless. So I don't think paying attention is like too important in poker. I don't think checking your cards when it's your turn or whatever is important. Actually, I kind of actively hate it because it slows down the game. I just think it's one of those things where for the most part, as long as you're feeling good and healthy and you feel like you're locked in, whatever that looks like for you, you're going to be doing good at the poker table. Like
I actually very much agree with that point. We've never brought it up before, but looking before your turn. If I'm deep in a tournament, I'll wait for my turn. Or if I'm playing a really high cash game, but on a normal daily basis, I'm peeling my cards immediately. If you want to try to get a tell off me, go for it. Like I'm not afraid of it. And I think it does slow down the game. Like think about how many more hands per hour we could see if people just all looked at their cards at the same time. It's crazy.
Also, yeah. I'm a DJ. I want to look at them one at a time. If I get dealt an ace, I want the sweat. You know,
I like that. I like that.
I've been doing that like look at it.
Whenever I have like if I have like a beverage and I'm playing, that's immediately when I start like checking the first card first. But oh man, I'm totally with it. I agree with everything you said.
Yeah, I just think it's like, you know, at the end of the day, it's okay if you're not super focused. Like I have some sessions where I'm pretty locked in, and then some where I'm like watching fucking TikTok because I don't want to talk to the people in my at my table. They're not fun to talk to. Nobody's drinking. Nobody's having a good time. The game's decent. And I'm just going to watch TikTok and like not really sweat it.
And that's like 60% of the time. Like 60% of the time you get like a decent table that's like not mega social and like you're just like, all right, like I could live with this. This is fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, and that's okay. Like, but I will say like if my, you know, I actually view this as somewhat of an obligation on my part, although I don't think you have to. If people are having fun in my game and they want to talk, I'm down. Like I'm always down to do that for the most part. If someone's like, hey, are you having a beer? I'm like, I am now. You know, like, that's like kind of the way I roll with it. Like whatever energy my table is putting down, that's what I'm picking up. And I just try to like keep the game fun and lively for the recreational players that are enjoying themselves.
That's awesome. And that's an important part of the game. To enjoy the recreationals, we got to keep them in the game or we'll just be playing against tough games. My first question for you has to do with your recent transitions, both in terms of online to live, as well as from the Bay Area to Vegas. How have both of these transitions go? I know you've been a little frustrated with live poker just because you can't defend as wide because the drop is crazy, stuff of that nature. So could you just talk about that a little?
Yeah, so I moved from California to Las Vegas for a few reasons. One, I think there's a lot of advantages to being in Vegas as opposed to California for playing poker. The biggest one is lower drop. I don't think people understand how much the drop affects win rate or how much it affects your preflop strategy. If you're like cold calling opens and stuff like that, and there's a $6 or $7 drop, you're just punting. Like there's no way you're making plus EV decisions. You're getting obliterated by the drop playing a strategy like with any flats, like maybe even in the big blind.
Even like people are lower it goes, it doesn't change, right? Like at 2-3, they're still taking like 5+1+1 or 6+1+1 at some places.
Yep.
Which is just insane if you're thinking like from your normal rake perspective at like a percentage casino place.
You like to put it in perspective, there's less than if it's like one big blind up to 5%, which is like high for a lot of online rake, but if that's like what the rake is, you like can't defend queen 10 off on the big blind to a min raise. It's losing.
Sam Clark is going to hate to hear that. he's in the chat right now, and he is going to be fuming that you just told.
I mean, it's true. You can look at any good chart that has like any good preflop sim. It's like going to tell you to fold. So it's like, you know, and that's not like it's like a button open against like an MP or under the gun open. Or whatever. But the important thing is that like people defend their big blind way too much to begin with, and also like they don't really understand the theory of how the drop is affecting your win rate and the theory about creating like a big blind calling range in general. Like they're just not well studied. So it's like, I think for the most part, there's a lot of dead money in the California games because people are playing so horribly pre-flop and they don't understand how to adjust for the drop. But what you end up having to do is play a very boring strategy where you're basically just folding and 3-betting very linearly to attack like the $25 open plus cold caller in a 5-5 game, right? So, which is not super interesting poker, actually. You're basically just being a nit. But that's like the way you're incentivized to play against other people playing that strategy.
There's this crazy place in the United States called Texas, and they don't have a drop.
I know, they have time rake.
Time rake. Yes. Bring it everywhere.
In Las Vegas, there's a few nice things, right? The rake is a lot lower. which is great. It means you can kind of play like if you play online and you have pretty well studied online preflop ranges for cash, that translates super well to live poker for the most part, which is in Vegas at least, which is really nice. And in Texas, right, when there's no drop, whenever the drop is low. The other thing is I probably have eaten like $1,500, $2,000 in free food, like comp food, since moving to Vegas, which is like awesome. People don't like, it matters. So like it's free money, right? So it's like a little bit of rake back, which does not hurt. And there's a lot of game availability in Vegas. And there's also like it's one of the only places in the country that has like a linear path to moving up. So in Vegas, there's 1-3-300 cap, 1-3-400 cap, 1-3-500 cap, 2-5 500 cap, 2-5 1K cap, 2-5 1500 cap, Bellagio 510s 1500 cap, Aria 510s 3K cap. And then there's like literally a ladder. Like there's a stake ladder on the strip where you can always just find the next biggest game, where you can buy in for a little deeper or move up stakes or whatever, or move up stakes and play 100 big blinds, or move up stakes and play 200 big blinds. So it's like there's a wide game availability and range of games. So when you're thinking about your journey as a poker player, you can actually sort of linearly move up the stakes in a way where like you could go play a 1-3 game in Texas and that is a 5-10 game. Right?
Oh, yes. No question.
So it's like, but that doesn't really exist in Vegas, right? Like it's like, for the most part, the games are as advertised. And as a result, they might be less profitable, but there's also the upside that there's a little bit less volatility in the games, right? You're not all in with ace 10 off against like a whale who's open jamming, which is like, you should call your ace 10 off against someone who's blind jamming, but like, you're not happy. You're not like, pump in the fist.
I'll get it in. I'm thrilled.
I'm getting it. Sure. I'm a 60-40. Let's go. Like run it, like it's not a big deal, but like my point more is that like you have a little bit lower volatility, lower rake comps, and like kind of a clear progression path. So I think there's a lot of advantages to being a pro in Vegas, despite the fact that the games tend to be not as action as other places in the country.
There's just more rungs on that ladder. Like if you wanted to go pro in New England, like that's really difficult, because if you started a small roll, like it just takes you a while to get from 1-2 and then jump to 2-5. Because you're talking about jumping from a $300 to an 800 or a 1K cap. Yeah. Like that's a dramatic jump in buy-in structure. So like,
if you're a 1-3 player in Vegas and you've been playing at the Bellagio in the Aria for a while, you can go play at the Wynn and buy in for 500. And then now it's like you're playing a slightly bigger game.
Yep.
That's all it takes.
So our next question for you is also about this transition from being a recreational player to going professional. You have fulfilled every recreational poker's dream of cutting that tether between you and the office job and going full-time pro. Mm-hmm. So you did in 2021. We're approaching a year at some point this year of full-time professional play. Yeah, do you regret the decision at all to make the jump? And what advice would you give to someone who is a office job person and is thinking, maybe I could be a professional poker player?
I don't regret it. It's really good for me. So for context, I was laid off, and then I had what I guess you would call like professional poker player training wheels in the form of unemployment insurance. So it's one of those things where like for a while, like it was like while I was transitioning and considering it, when I was really considering it and I was still looking for work and applying for jobs, I was playing a ton of poker because I just had way more free time, right? So like in a sense, I had like a nice grace period where I was able to sort of like have some money coming in while I think about my next move and apply to jobs and play. And really what I found was that I just had no motivation whatsoever to work. I have really bad ADHD. I'm like super passionate. Like I'm such an on or off, hot or cold kind of person. It's like, I'm all in on the thing I'm doing and I don't give a fuck about anything else. Like I just want to grind this thing and be sick at it, or I just want to not do it. Like I have a really hard time with the middle ground.
I'm so with you there. I'm so with you there.
A lot of really good poker players are. It's such a common theme with poker players is they're very obsessive, and it makes sense. Like poker is really hard. And that's one thing I'll say to people who are thinking about maybe doing this for a living is it is so much harder than you think. It is really, really difficult. Like I know so many people who busted like dozens of deposits online in trying to get good at poker and failing and don't play anymore, Yeah. Or like, it is hard. It's so hard. The game is so complicated. It's just as complicated as any of the hardest games in the world. And, in a way, it's more brutal than any of those games because, like, Hikaru Nakamura was on Doug Polk's podcast, which is an awesome podcast
I haven't
interview.
seen that episode.
I highly
I've
recommend
been
it.
watching a lot of that.
Hikaru said, one of the things about chess is like when you make the right move, you just are instantly rewarded in chess. You're always snap rewarded when you make the correct play. That is not true in poker at all. And I think that it's not even like, there are some situations I've been in where like I have like check raise bluffed like the same spot now in like, oh God, I think I've done it like 3 or 4 times in the last like 6 months where I'm like, this is that spot again where I'm just always supposed to bluff here. And I've done it and I've gotten snapped off by the nuts like every time. And I'm double blocking the nuts. I have like a set blocker. Like I have like so much shit going on. My hand has every blocker and it's like, and they just get snapped off. They have it, so it's like things where it's like, I know it's the right thing to do. Like I'm going to always do it because I know it's right. But like, you can see why people get superstitious about those things.
And
right?
some people look at you when you make those plays. I've had friends. I'm gonna call him out. Is my audio cutting out? Oh, but George, like I double blocked. I double blocked everything, just like June basically did in her hand. And he snapped me off with like the second nuts, and he's like, "Bro, why would you do that? You totally punted to me." I was like, "Do you really want me to explain why I did that to you?" Like, like I don't know if you'll even understand some of the terms I'm using.
Yeah. No, I mean
that was one of the things that I found so hard about like. I found so hard to fathom that people could play poker for such a long period of time and at no point take it seriously and then build up these horrible habits. And that's just like how they play. And that took me a long time to get there. And once you stop giving recreational players as much credit for thinking as you are thinking, then you're going to unlock an unreal new category of win rate. Because they're just going to do so many things that are just so bad. That you could
I think my advice, this kind of loops into what I was going to say would be my main advice when you're becoming good at poker and you're starting to really feel like you sit down at a table and you're like, oh, I'm the best player at this table for sure. Like, and there's like a thing that happens where like, I'm not super egotistical about my poker skill. To be clear, I think anybody who plays like 200 online full-time or 500 online full-time is for sure a better poker player than me. And I very rarely sit down at a table and don't feel like I'm the best reg at a table. But once you get to that point, there's a second step you have to do. You have to just be maximally disrespectful to everyone's game. They don't have a bluff. Don't hero them. Like they're a fucking station. You just can't don't bluff them. Like you just have to you want to be sick because like you feel like you're so good and you understand the theory and you understand the spot and like you're playing so much better than these people, but they're bad and you need to treat them like they're not good at poker. And that is a very hard thing to do when you become more skilled. It's very hard to underrate, or it's very hard to overstate this. I have never seen a reg jam at the win on me as a bluff in a 3-bet pot. I have never seen it. I watched these hands. Anytime there's a big pot playing, I'm like, all right, you're all in for 1,500. Let's see your bluff. And it's like, no, it's just like you fucking heroed with aces. That guy had a set. Like, GG, nice hand. It's never a bluff. Like, it's just crazy to me because I'm like, I bluff. Like, I said to some hands, like, I bluff big. Like, I'll bluff for all of it. Like, I just think if I think they're gonna fold, I'm gonna fucking bluff. Like, that's like the way I play. And it's like, I just think regs don't bluff. Like, I just don't see it. It's like one of those things where you want to respect them. You want to say like, oh, you're also a professional. You're also a skilled poker player. I don't believe it. No one bluffs.
That's such a good piece of advice. Because like when I'm thinking about like how I want like us like when we're creating poker content, I always want it to like help people when they're in the spot, how they should be thinking in the spot. And that's so helpful because that's like a tip that you can use. Like when you're sitting there and you're looking at that person, be a little disrespectful to their game. Be a little bit like, get a little bit into their shoes and be like, if this guy sucks, and he probably sucks, what would someone who sucks do here? And when you start doing that, you're going to make so many better decisions than
for sure.
doing it the other way.
I mean, it's one of those things where I'm like, I really emphasize this. It's like, until someone shows you they will bluff for their stack, you should never hero them. If you're playing with somebody a lot, like you play the same regs a lot, if you don't see them stick their stack in with a bluff, like a stone airball, like backdoor miss flush draw, you should call 0 bluff catchers.
Yeah.
Until you see that happen, because you just should respect them. Like, You know, people don't have the heart. How many times do people check back top pair, top kicker on dry boards? They do it all the time. Watch live poker players. They check back like top and bottom pair. Like they
snap check it back.
I know. Like, you think they're bluffing you?
They're so happy. They're so happy.
They're checking back 2 pair. You think they're bluffing you? They're not bluffing you. You know, like it's just, you have to get in that mindset where like, it doesn't matter how good you are at poker. You have to like think about what your opponents are actually doing as like a population. And very often they're playing very exploitably.
And in 1-3 games in Texas specifically, I can completely resonate with that because I value bet thin way too often. I would get destroyed if I value bet my like 20-25% on like on certain boards against pros, because they would just, if you have a nut flush blocker, like I'm betting like
raise.
Yeah, and I'm getting raised virtually 0% to my basically blocker bets. Like they're just not raising me, even with very good hands. They're just snap calling my blocker bets with like top 2, and I'm like, are you okay? Like,
yeah, yeah, you should be betting extremely thin in live poker in general. It's just like one of those kind of known exploits at this point. But
yeah,
you just see it a lot where it's like, I think also people like really good players fall victim to this. I'm just going to say, if my opponent's a recreational player and the flush comes in the river and I make a flush, I'm going to donk bet half pot. I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it every time.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get called most of the time. So
and when I get raised with a middling flush,
we're gonna fold.
We're gonna fold.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things where it's like you have to sort of recognize that like it hurts your soul to just make the flush in the river and then donk bet half pot versus this recreational player. But they're gonna call and they're gonna be like, oh yeah, I knew you had the flush, and you go, yeah, and then you're gonna win the pot and an extra half pot bet. So it's just how it is, right? Like, you know, on some level. So that's just really my advice to people who are really getting into poker seriously is it's really important to know what's good, because when you do encounter good players, you need to be able to play on their level. You need to feel like you're as good as them and not be backing down when you're playing pots at them. But you also need to recognize when you're just the best reg at your table and the other regs aren't bluffing and people are kind of being nitty and stuff like that.
So I think it's pretty obvious you're a pretty well-studied player at this point. Obviously, everyone has a long way to go, but what sort of tools do you use, or what sort of tools, books, software would you recommend to a casual person watching this?
Sure. So when I got into poker, I bought Pile Solver like 6 months or something into learning, which is silly. I'm a nerd, but it's like, the thing about it is I don't know how good of a decision that was. I think it might have actually even hurt me a little bit because I didn't totally understand how the solver worked or how poker game theory worked all that well. But now in hindsight, it's like, well, 3 years into playing poker and 2.5 years with a solver, I feel very like, good about it, like good about like my decision to get one and like to study and learn with it in all of its manifestations, all of its good and bad. But in general, my day-to-day is I use GTO Wizard, which is a sort of like online sim library that anyone can use. Very good. It's very like, if you don't know anything about solves and you just want to look and see how computers play spots, I think that's like one of the best resources. The UI is very good. It's nice. It also has a lot of MTT stuff, which might be useful to some of your viewers as well. I don't play MTTs, but for people who do, yeah, really it's just Pio and talking to friends. I recommend making friends with online players and playing online. If you don't play online, you're bad at poker. It's kind of just the truth. There's no live only reg that's good, I promise. They are all massive shit regs in like maybe beating 100 NL, maybe, right? So it's like you just have to play online and you have to use sims and get better. And you have to develop your own exploits and be a critical thinker about like what's working and what's not working while simultaneously not being results oriented, right? So yeah. I would say like the path to being a really good top professional poker player is playing online, studying sims, and making friends who are better than you at poker so they can yell at you. That's
I wonder how June would respond to someone who recently was at our coaching session who didn't record any of their hands. Ryan had a little bit to say about that. It was this person in a poker flop server trying to get better, and they never recorded hands.
Yeah, they never recorded hands. So I mean, I think he had to be new, like very, very new.
Oh, he is
new.
New.
And it's like, yeah, like man, like that's step one. Write it down. so that you can look at it later. Like that is just step one. That is how you get better. You share it with somebody and somebody's going to tell you that this was dumb and this is why. And eventually it'll get into your head.
Hopefully they tell you the why. Some people just say this was dumb.
Some people just say it's dumb. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. And I also want to be extra clear about the studying thing. I don't consider myself a super well-studied player, like, or even super good. Like, I'm a winning live professional by a pretty big winning live professional, I think, by a lot of people's standards. But like, you know, in the 2-5 streets, for whatever's that's worth, I have very low ego in the fact that I'm basically right in the middle of the professional player totem pole. But it's like, you know, I have friends who play 500 and 1K online, and I would literally like not sit a game with them because it would just be bad for me, right? They're just better than me. So it's like, you kind of have to recognize too that like there's a very wide spectrum of players. I'm sort of like in a situation where in live poker, your need to get better is sort of tampered by the fact that people are so bad that if you just play, you'll make money. So you don't like that the incentive to study isn't as there. Whereas if you're primarily an online player, you're really incentivized to study, like as much as you play, probably.
Yeah.
So that scale gets tipped more. So I am trying to play more online just because I think that that's a way for me to improve and to stay invested in improving.
I totally agree. It's because the spots come at you so much faster. Like you just have to be able to compress your thought process into making 30-second decisions. Yeah. Like that is not an easy thing to do in a game that has so many variables like poker, which I think is part of the reason why I like live, because it takes that off. Like it kind of puts the training wheels on, you know, you don't get a time limit on what you're doing. So I love that. So next question, on a recent interview with poker.org, you were asked about how players and staff treat you as a transgender woman in their poker room. Your answer was that they generally chose well-intentioned ignorance. Quote, people understand the concept of supporting transgender people, but they're not sure what they should do or say. Could you take us through a few good examples of positive support in the poker room and a few of the negative ones as well?
Sure. In general, I like to think that like disputes at poker tables, there's like think of like a gradient of like someone said nice hand and the other person got grumpy because it wasn't a nice hand. Like that's like a 1, right? And there's a 10, which is maybe like someone throwing something at someone or like calling them a slur or
physical violence.
Physical violence. So you have like this range of like shitty behavior at a poker table, right? Or like grumpy people, right? Some things are like people don't understand that they're basically a 10. So I'll give you some examples of things that happened to me where I think it went well or badly. The opening night at Resorts World, I was playing 1-3 because of my 5-10 broke, and I was waiting. I was playing 1-3 while I waited for Melissa to finish up. She was playing a session or something, and someone misgendered me, and I said, "Hey, you know my pronouns are she, her," and they said, "I'm not going to call you that because you're a dude." And then I said, "Floor." You know, there's like really only one sort of reaction I can have to that, which is just get the floor involved. And they immediately removed him from the game. And they were like, you have to call people what they want to be called. And I think in the floor's words, it's like, we learned this all in kindergarten. It kind of doesn't matter what your opinion is of people. When someone says, hey, I want to be called this, you call them that. It's not complicated. I don't give a fuck what you think about transgender people. But like, you just call me by the name I want to be called and the pronouns I want to use. It's like not that hard. So, you know, that's an excellent example. And then that dude freaked out and then like threatened me more, and now he's banned. But like, regardless of that whole situation, that was insane. That was like kind of surreal because he was like almost like a cartoon villain of a human. Like it made no sense because he was just
you see those like way too often in poker rooms though. People who look like cartoon villains.
Then he started like screaming at me and calling me a tranny and stuff, and it was like, all right, well, if you weren't banned already, you're like done.
Yeah,
like,
you're just putting more nails in the coffin.
Yeah. So that guy, whatever, fuck that guy. But the point I was trying to make is that the floor handled it really well, in that they were like, they immediately came over, they understood that someone was intentionally misgendering me, which is harassment, and then removed them from the table and tried to talk to them about it. When they escalated the situation, they removed them from the card room. And it's like, that's it. That's like a fantastic way for that situation to go. I felt safe. Security was there at the poker room immediately. I didn't feel like I was in any physical danger. And then they got rid of that guy. And then afterwards they apologized to me. And I was like, you don't have to apologize to me. What the fuck? That like, you know, like you guys were great. And there's a floor woman who was there that night named Ruth, who works at Resorts World, who's just awesome. And she was just like, it is 2021. What the fuck? You know, like, you know, very real with me about it. And, you know, she was fantastic. So, you know, that's a really good example. I've also had situations at other card rooms. You know, I think this was at the Win where someone was essentially like misgendered me and I said she, and then they were like, he, it, whatever. Like, and then like kind of got in my face about it. And then was like, kind of like, fuck you. And like super aggro with me. And it was like really clear that they were treating me this way because I was trans, which is fine. I mean, it's not fine, but it's like, I'm used to it. And I'm just sort of like, I call the floor and the floor is like, oh, can everyone just calm down and play some poker? And I'm like, we're past that.
Yeah.
We're not at the point where we're calming down and playing poker. This person needs to go. Like, you know, like it's like this person's aggressive with me and intentionally misgendering me and being disrespectful on the basis of my identity. They need to leave. Like this isn't a debate that we should be having. I shouldn't have to defend this to you, you know? So it's hit and miss with the floor. I think like it kind of depends on the education level of the actual staff who's like aware of how severe and uncomfortable that is. Because if someone's not gendering me correctly at a table and the floor is not removing them, I'm just going to leave because I'm not safe in the space. Like it's clear that I don't have any like backup with the casino staff at that point. So
that's interesting. I mean, I hate to interrupt you, but I mean, that really was going to lead directly into my next question, which is really about like what wholesale changes can the poker community make as a whole to be more accepting to people who are different? Because I mean, there's no covering up the fact that poker has been a white, cis, straight males game for what, 60 years now.
Yeah.
And that it is only just in the past, maybe, I mean, I don't want to take away from any of the accomplishments that women have made in poker over the last couple of decades, but like in the last 5 years alone, I think there's been a real renaissance in the number of women playing cash games in your normal card rooms and things. Mm-hmm. It's like, you know, what other wholesale changes do we need to keep adding to the diversity that's coming to the poker community?
Yeah, I think ultimately there's just like a lot of really annoying misogynistic behavior that happens in like every fucking cash game. And it's like, I try to call it out when I see it. The truth is, and I'm not trying to make some kind of grand socioeconomic statement by saying this, it's really more prevalent in the lower stakes cash games, which is a big problem because that's how people get into poker, is playing lower stakes cash games. So, and tournaments, lower stakes, like dailies and stuff like that. Like the amount of times someone in a daily, I've heard, like, I think Abby made a story recently. She's a poker player, makes some Instagram content about like someone pulling her aside and like berating her for some call she made or something. And it's
like queens in a 3-bet pot.
She called me right after that to talk to her about it, and she's just like, why would he do this? Like, I don't understand. Like, we've also had Abby on the podcast, so check out that episode if you're listening.
Yeah, she's amazing.
But yeah, Abby's great. But it's ridiculous. What happens, what goes on, whether it be gender, or race. I've seen all sorts of just horrible comments be made. But it's good to hear that there are some floors that are handling this correctly, and hopefully most handle it in the way that, was it Resorts World we're giving a shout out to, or
I love Resorts World. It was at Resorts World. Her name was Ruth, and there was another gentleman there. I actually forget what floor it was because it's been like 6 or 7 months since it happened.
Right.
But I think the thing I really want to emphasize, and this is the most important thing, it's listen. It's not like that the industry needs to change or that the floor needs to change or that I need to change or anything like that. What it is poker tables usually have 7 dudes and 1 girl, right? Yep. There is 1 dude harassing 1 girl and 6 dudes who say nothing. That is the problem.
Yes.
There is no other problem. Like, that's the problem. You know, and it's like when someone makes like a misogynistic comment and then no one says anything, that's the problem. And like, I can say something and I try to, but sometimes I just don't have the energy to, because I'm the only one who ever says anything. When someone's like, that waitress is so hot, look at her, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, you got to not do that. That's like pretty inappropriate. But when it's coming from me, no one cares. Like, I'm just like some queer person. Like, their opinion of me is already like 1 out of 10.
Right.
Like, they don't give a shit about me.
It's got to be coming from people who look like them.
Yes, exactly. It
It's got
has
to be coming from people like me and Bryce.
Yeah,
and like I think that's hard. It's hard for us. Like,
of course it is. Do you think it's not hard for me to be harassed?
For so many things. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like, or for Abby, right? Like, imagine being Abby. Imagine like how uncomfortable you would be.
If I was there, I would like, regardless of like gender, I would blow up on the person if they pull someone aside, berate them, and I see them crying. She said that people from her new table saw her crying. I hope this isn't exposing too much information. I think she talked about her story, but yeah, like if I saw someone being berated by someone for a play they made to the point where they were crying, I know for a fact I would stand up and say something, because that is just so awful. And sometimes you don't know like how words affect people. You may assume how much it hurts them, but you might have a bad day or whatever it is. But like when you physically see someone crying, like at that point, I mean, there's already no excuse for not standing up for people, but there's just no excuse. But 100%. I think that's really well worded, and I think you're really articulate in all of your discussions today. So I'm also excited for the hand history portion of this. Also, Caitlin Comiskey says, shout out June. She says hi to you.
I'm really excited to meet her one day. She's fantastic.
Got a lot of love in the chat right now. I agree.
Well, we appreciate you coming on, sharing both your insight in the hands as well as just your commentary on everything. I thought you were very articulate and just absolutely loved having you on, and can't wait to play with you soon. Ryan, do you have any closing words?
No, I could agree. I literally couldn't echo. I couldn't have said what Bryce said any better, and that's why I'm struggling to say any words. So really, thank you so much. This was a pleasure, really.
Of course.
Thank you. Take care, June.
Cool.
Will do.
And thank you guys for tuning in, both to the June segment as well as to the hand history segment. Very much appreciated, and thank you for the submissions. We look forward to reviewing more next week. I got a ton this week, including Curtis's, which cannot wait to review. And thank you guys again for another great week. Ryan, any closing thoughts?
Nope. As always, Bryce, you say all the brilliant things and then you throw it to me and there's nothing left to be said.
Smash that like and subscribe button. Come on.
There you go. Exactly. Smash that like and subscribe button, and we will see you guys next week.